I want to take you to one of the coolest places for a drink just outside Sydney. It's not the city, it's not Coogee, it's Coledale. Yeah, Coledale. A tiny seaside town of 1,000 people just north of Wollongong, home to 88-year-old Rooster, and this place, the Coledale RSL. From the outside, it looks like your average RSL club. There's an Australian flag out front and a monument to the fallen. But what makes Coledale different is, well, a crisis. One that shut down the club for months, brought the community together, and transformed this venue into a bright and thriving spot, run almost entirely by volunteers. An hour and a half from Sydney and 30 minutes north of Wollongong, the Coledale Returned and Services League came into being in 1948 as soldiers began to return from the horrors of World War II. Local resident Rooster was born just around here before the war and spent most of his life mining for coal just behind the pub, a building that's been part of his life since he was a kid.
The outside, especially the front of it, is more or less the same as what it was when it opened in 1948. And across the road was an empty big block of ground, and I stood there as a 12-year-old and I watched them building this building, voluntarily of course, with veterans from the Second World War actually. Yeah.
But over time, just like they did around the state, pokies took their hold in Coledale. There were 12 poker machines dropped in the middle of this club and dozens of screens featuring everything from Keno to fake horse betting. But after a while, those electronic rivers of gold ran out. By the end of 2022, after years of COVID and months of heavy rain, there was no cash left. The RSL closed the hall which was rented by its club and shut its doors forever. But that wasn't good enough for these locals. They wanted people back around, so they hatched a plan. Bring the community together, sell most of their pokies, renovate the joint, and have volunteers man the bars. So they got to work, especially Donna.
Let's do it. There's no reason we can't do this, you know. And then my family got involved and some of my friends got involved, and before we knew it, we had 60 plus volunteers. And it's not a big community here, it's reasonably small really. So for 60 people to give up their time, and it was hundreds and hundreds of hours of painting and cleaning and coordinating rosters and yeah.
And over time, people like this guy, Jeremy Pope, transformed this club.
One of the biggest changes we've made is the wall that used to run down the centre of the club here. It used to come to about here, right down the middle. It was here because the poker machines were in this room behind me and it had to be there. It virtually cut off half the club for kids. We've ripped up a whole extra piece of carpet right out to the wall and polished the floor to create a dance floor and have bands up the end here. This area here used to be covered in screens. There was about 8 screens with odds and totes and horse races, etc. But now we've got some local artists on there.
And this Easter weekend, they opened their doors.
Almost 6 weeks ago, we brought you the story of Coledale RSL Club Limited announcing its triumphant return. And today's that day with the doors reopened to the public. But it wouldn't be possible without the 60-odd volunteers working behind the scenes.
The newfound success of this tiny community club is amazing. But it tells some much bigger stories of city people moving further out of the suburbs and investing in their local communities, of the nationwide push against addictive poker machines, and of what happens when locals decide to fight for their community.